Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, coming to you 6 days a week as we interview whitetail experts and hear their traditions and personal stories of the hunt. Learn more about the latest gear, discover proven tips, and the latest strategies so you can make your next hunt a success. Now, here's your host, Bruce Hutchin.
Whitetail Rendezvous is pleased to announce a partnership with GoHunt.com. Who's GoHunt.com? Well, if you're a DIY hunter, you need the information at GoHunt.com/insider. Why? Because it provides 4,200 profiles, every unit, every species, and every season. Furthermore, they give in-depth analysis, interactive maps, unit access, and seasonal trends. Draws are very important, and they give you the most accurate information in the business. All this is available when you go to GoHunt.com/insider. Make sure you use promo code WR when you join Insider. You'll get a $50 gift card for GoHunt.com Gear Shop. Remember, when you become a member of GoHunt.com/insider, you're going to get a $50 gift card to Go Hunt Gear Shop. What's in the gear shop? The best gear that you can buy for hunting the West. All in all, if you're hunting out West in 2018, GoHunt.com/insider is where you need to be to get all the research information. When you use promo code WR, Whitetail Rendezvous receives a small commission from GoHunt.com. Hey, folks, we're in for a treat today. Why? Because most people in the world start the day off with coffee. And so I'm with Mike Swartzentruber, and he and his buddies own Hunter's Blend Coffee. Mike hails from Ohio, and I'm just really happy to have him on the show today. So, Mike, welcome to Whitetail Rendezvous.
Thank you, Bruce.
So let's talk about the coffee company, how it started, and why you ended up at ATA a couple of years ago, introducing it to the outdoor industry.
Yeah. Well, we've been, through the parent company, importing coffee direct from farmers for over 15 years. My brother-in-law and sister started doing that. My brother-in-law, Paul, was in a missions organization, and when he would be down in these Central American countries, he saw the churches had financial needs. And, he said, you know what, I just paid $14 for a bag of specialty coffee, and here you are knee deep in coffee. But found out that it's really difficult to buy because it normally goes through 5 or 6 different handlers before it gets to the United States. And long story short, was able to develop friendships, relationships directly with farmers. And so by being able to bypass all those middlemen, is able to pay the farmer 2 times or more what they were normally getting. When the commodity prices are down, these farmers are selling their coffee for less than their cost to produce it. And Fair Trade does what it can. It's on 10% of the coffee if a farmer's in the program, and it's, it'll pay a little bit more for that coffee. If coffee commodities are way down, that could still be below the farmer's cost. So by being able to buy direct, we can pay them a lot more. It's not a social program or a handout. It's paying them what it's worth by bypassing all those middle guys. The other thing that's unique, too, is a lot of green coffee importers. In fact, probably most of them, the big green coffee importers, would tend to have a pretty different worldview than those of us in the hunting and outdoor sports would view, and would be more inclined to probably give to lobbyists and causes that would maybe work against what we do in the outdoors. And so it's kind of a two-pronged vision, I guess, that we have. The one is we're able to do good with these local farmers, and we're able to do good for the hunting community. We're hunter friendly. We donate to hunting causes. We're hunters ourselves. But what I've been astounded and I guess really humbled by is what these local people do with their increased in income. The Hunter's Blend is a blend of Nicaraguan and Thailand coffee. In Nicaragua, Diego, the farmer, he's on the family farm there. He's been able to sponsor over 30 pastors, get them started. He's looking at launching a program to help some of these boys that lost their fathers in all the fighting down there. There's a whole generation of boys that, along with that, they've lost their identity, their legal identity. And so if he knows one of them, he can vouch for him that he knows who this is, and then get him an ID and give him 5 acres of land off of his Diego's farm to be able to farm on shares with Diego's for a few years, and then he'll have his own little property. And that's a program he's looking into. But he's always looking for ways to help the local people, which is pretty humbling to me. Over in Thailand is really astounding. The people there employ over 80 women hand sorting coffee beans, and about 3/4 of those women were previously in the city in some form of sex trade, and they now have a legitimate, dignified job where they can earn an income, be with their families. And so it's, again, like I said, it's not a social program or a handout. It's just good business, and it ends up doing good locally there. So we're not going to change the world, but we can help change the world for a few people.
Now, when you're at ATA, I think you were talking to Jay McManage about, what's this with coffee and hunting and the outdoors? Where'd that get off?
No, that's a really good question. And it's funny, a lot of people, that'll be their again, at the ATA this year, a lot of people said, oh, so why coffee? And what Paul told Jay there when he was being interviewed a year ago to be able to see if he could get into the show or not, Jay asked him the same question, and Paul said, well, coffee makes the hunting world go around. I mean, how many times do you hear in hunting camp, hey, first one up, put the coffee on? And Jay said, I get it. And it really is that way. And for those of us that do drink coffee, it's a year-round thing. It's not just hunting camp, of course. And so it's a lot more than putting a deer sticker on a random bag of coffee and say, hey, here's hunting coffee. It's what we're trying to do in partnering with the hunting industry, being pro-hunting and supporting hunting causes and that sort of thing. But it's the coffee drinkers. As soon as you start talking about that, it's true. If I go for a 2-hour drive, I'm putting coffee in my thermos and hitting the road. It's just kind of part of daily life for those of us that drink a lot of coffee.
And there's a few million that start their day with a cup of coffee, just like you're doing now. There's some guys like me, we're in the minority, but I drink tea.
Yeah.
Tea and honey, green tea and honey. That's, I boil water in the morning and my jet boil. It goes into my mug. And, if I jump in the truck, it goes with me there. Or I have small thermoses that just go in my backpack for my, mid-morning break or whatever. And,
right.
But we all like a hot beverage. I guess we could say that. And
I think so.
I would challenge any listener to say, what do I drink in the morning? And very few people don't drink coffee.
Right. Well, a lot of times, and I was more this way up till a number of years ago when my wife and I started buying our coffee from Paul and Grace. It's whatever's on sale at the store this week. You're just drinking off the shelf coffee. And once you get used to, once you taste a specialty coffee, it's the difference between going to the grocery store and getting one of those half pink things they call a tomato, and it almost crunches like an apple, or you go out to your garden and get this deep red, ripe tomato off the vine. I mean, they're like two different fruits. And that's kind of how it is with coffee. You break open a can of coffee off the shelf and you drink a special quality blend like this. It hasn't been roasted 2 years ago. It was just recently roasted. It's like night and day.
Yeah, I've got as we talked in the warm up, I got a great friend, Brett Dixler, and he owns and runs Mission Coffee, and very similar, a business plan. He actually goes down to Honduras and Guatemala and all Central American places and works directly with the people. And he's got pictures. I didn't believe this, but he's got pictures of the guy who owns the coffee place. He carries a gun. He just flat carries a gun, and
Wow.
to keep people from coming in and stealing his coffee. And that's how precious it is in those countries. And so, I guess, folks, I wanted Mike on the thing because this is a little bit of our social conscience at Whitetail Rendezvous. There's a lot of things we can do. There's a lot of people that will ask you for your dollar, but coffee is something that we do. Just look at Starbucks or Caribou Coffee or you name it, Dunkin' Donuts. I mean, coffee is a huge business, huge $1 billion business. And so if here at Whitetail Rendezvous we can support some folks that are doing it a little bit differently, and you can, then it's more than drinking a cup of coffee to me. And so, that's my soapbox on that. And we're going to turn it into a hunting show again. But I wanted Mike just to share something that a couple of guys are doing, a couple of guys and gals are doing, that for a couple of people are making a huge difference in their lives. So with that, we're gonna switch out and find out how an Iowa boy got to Ohio and just shot his first deer about 3 years ago. So let's start on that 3 years ago first deer. Tell us the story.
Oh, I had gotten a small deer in my very first year, but 3 years ago, which would have been, I'm losing track of time, but it was the second year. I was all geared up to hunt the rut, and I at that time was just hunting on our property. We own 5 acres. The back of it is a creek with about 100 yards of trees on either side. I mean, we maybe have an acre or two of trees, but it is a good travel route, and there's a couple resident does that live probably not on our property, but they're through here all the time. So I had been listening. Well, one of your guests that you've had on before, Jerry Everhart with Hunt Fish Journal, kind of followed his.
Great guy.
Yeah. So, I mean, I figure I'm learning from somebody who's in his 70s, who's been hunting for, I don't know, 30, 40 years, making copious field notes every time he goes to the field. I can probably learn a few things from a guy like that. So I have been following his kind of idea on using scrapes and licking branches and stuff. So I was all geared to hunt the rut that year. And a couple of days before the rut, got news that my dad had a stroke on a trip when he was out in Maryland. And so ended up going to the hospital, and I spent the last year of his life in the hospital with him the last week. And I'll never regret that. I'm just thankful that I got to be there, and we could never talk, but it was really a precious time. Some of my family was able to be there, but so then I obviously missed the week of the rut. I was planning to hunt, but a few weeks later, my daughter looked out her back window and said, well, there's a deer standing out there. It was down across the creek, and I got the binoculars, and I noticed it was a buck, and he was injured. He wasn't moving around a lot, and I figured, well, he probably found a safe place. He thought he could just stand there in broad daylight and eat. So I had my son, showered up and all, and had my son take me out on the four-wheeler so I wouldn't disturb the deer so much, and he took me around back behind the deer, and of course he had just laid down. There wasn't a human walking around. It was just a machine. And so my son came back up to the house, and if you'd almost look at this setup, just think, if you imagine a baseball diamond, if our home was home base, the buck was standing across the creek, like between, second base and the outfield somewhere, let's say. And my tree stand was over in left field in this map that we're trying to draw in the mind. So I got up in my tree stand, and I spent some time looking. I didn't see a thing. And my son was over on, let's call it the right field, outfield area, just puttering around on the four-wheeler. Well, once he went back inside, I was about felt like giving up. I wasn't seeing a thing. And all of a sudden I saw a flash of white, and the buck was laying broad side of me, licking his wound. And I learned there how easy it is to overlook a deer if they could be standing right in front of you, and if you're not paying attention. He was 20 yards off, 30 yards. So he stood up and started feeding again, and I was able to get down into the creek and use that kind of for my cover, and stalked up really close to the deer. And he probably fed within 10 yards, and I was able to just peek across the top of the creek bed and shoot him. When I learned another lesson, I was shaking so bad, he took off like he wasn't injured or nothing. And I was like, oh, I missed that guy. So lesson number 2 that day, I got up out of the creek because went over to look for the arrow, and all of a sudden I see him take off. He just had gone 10 yards and was just standing there. Again, learning the lesson of you don't go, you clear the area for half an hour. Don't go looking for your deer right away. So I went back to the house, and then after I came out to look for him, there was hardly any blood, but, I was down in a creek, so it was not an angling down shot. So there was no blood really squirting out. And finally, I just went to where I saw him last, and that's actually where he piled up. He went another 20 yards. So when I got back to the house, though, the cool thing was my wife and my son had watched the whole thing from the back window of the house. So it was kind of a really unique, just the whole thing put together. Spending a week with my dad in the hospital, my daughter seeing the buck, my wife and my son, taking me out there, my wife and my son watching. I don't know, it was just the whole thing. It was a really unique experience. But so I made a Euro mount out of him, and that was just I don't have a lot of hunts under my belt, but that was definitely the most meaningful and the neatest one that I've had.
So when you skinned him out, had he been hit by a car or?
Well, his leg was broken. His leg was broken. So that was crazy too. When I shot him, I would have swore he was not injured. I mean, he moved like a healthy deer. It was amazing to see. But yeah, his one leg was completely broken, clean through. So yeah, I'm assuming it was a car hit.
Yeah, car or truck. Because I was thinking, a lot of deer do get up and run away after we shoot them, with our bow. For that matter, with our rifle. I mean,
right.
If it isn't in the right place,
right.
They can go for a long time. I hunt elk, and I've seen elk just go forever. I mean, really far.
Yeah.
And because it was a bad shot.
Yeah.
And I can remember I took a guy out to cow elk hunt, and he had a 7mm mag, and the cow was 75 yards away. He goes boom, and the elk just runs away. He was just flabbergasted. How can that happen? I mean, I'm shooting a 7mm, and boom. And I said, that's how tough they are. Plus they're juiced up, and,
right.
adrenaline going. And it didn't run a couple hundred yards, but it's just amazing, folks, what a deer can do. And that's the other thing I want to mention. You got to wait it out, even though it, double lung them, blood spurting all over the place. Doesn't matter. Just give it some time before you climb out of your blind, get down on your stand, because a lot of deer have been lost. And I was hunting with Sherry Yarborough and Jug Cooney in Iowa, and simply Judd, he goes to where deer was standing, where the first blood is, marks it, and especially at night, and then he walks away, and he doesn't go back into the next noontime. So he doesn't go in the morning, because if there are other deer around, then he's going to disrupt those deer. So he goes in at noontime, and he does have a Jack Russell, so it makes recovery really easy, if the deer's dead. And, that's something to think about, folks, because we all get excited. I'm as guilty as the next guy. Oh, man, I got him. Oh, he's going over that hill, or what? He's going in that swamp. Oh, no, but you do that, and you're going to bump the deer. 9 times out of 10, you're going to bump the deer. Your thoughts on that, Mike?
Well, I certainly learned that lesson that the other year when I got that buck. What you're talking about, how long they can run, I thought I was under the impression if they're double lung, they've got 40 yards and they're piled up. But this winter, I shot a doe, and she dropped like you shot her with a gun. I mean, she just dropped, but she got up and tried to run, but her back legs weren't working well, or they really didn't work. And I can't figure it out because the arrow went in, behind her left shoulder and came out kind of near her right shoulder, but her back legs weren't working. And I'm sure somebody knows why that is, but she drug herself a little distance, but not far, but I could tell she wasn't going to get anywhere. After 15, 20 minutes, it was getting dark, and I wanted to get wrapped up, and I was fairly confident she wasn't going to go. So I walked up and put another arrow into her, and she died almost right away. But when I field dressed her, as near as I could tell, both lungs had been, I got both lungs, and I don't know how long she was going to live, but I learned that too this year. They can live a long time.
Yeah, they can. Let's talk about, did you hunt last year?
Yeah, last year I did. Last year I was treating the scrapes one morning before I got in the stand, and it was so dark I could barely see a thing. And I hear this noise behind me, and 30 yards behind me, a big-bodied deer walked across. And here I am, bent over in a scrape, smelling like doe urine, and a big buck is right there. And I just didn't like my odds very well. So I wanted to get to the stand as soon as possible, but I had a trail blowing through the leaves to get to the stand, but it was on the other side of the stand. And I didn't want to take the time to walk all the way over there. So I just walked through the leaves, and it was like a herd of elephants. But the guy stuck around. And I got up in the stand, and he stayed around for, 10, 15 minutes. But at daylight, he was gone. At noon, I had to make a phone call, so I went back in to the house, did that, and came back out with a leaf blower and blew another trail to the stand so I could get to the stand multiple directions. Put the leaf blower back, got up in the stand. I had just clipped in. I didn't have anything ready yet, and I hear noise, and I look, and 50 yards out or 75 yards out, this big buck is heading straight towards me. So I was able to get everything ready, but he came within about 50 yards, and then he just made a semicircle all the way around me. And the only thing I can figure out, because it was a little more difficult for him to walk that way than if he had come straight toward me, and I have a feeling he was the one that was there that morning and just felt a little nervous about the area. So he avoided it, but that was a nice buck. I hunt such a limited area. I have limited opportunities, but I've seen some that was 50 yards, but there was a bunch of brush in between. So I wasn't able to even put a shot on. But out of the last 3 years, the first morning of being in the stand in the first 2-3 hours, I've had a nice buck come through. This year it was indecision on my part that I didn't punch the trigger, but and I got to say that's a lot to do with following that Jerry's kind of scrape method and timing and all that. But so yeah, this year my lesson was make up your mind ahead of time to pull the trigger. When that buck came through the first morning this year, he wasn't as old. He's probably only 2, but he had a really nice rack for a 2-year-old. It would have been a lot bigger than the one I shot before. He walked into the area, and I said to this thought, like a voice went through my head, this is the kind of deer that if you let him walk, you wish you would have shot. So I came to full draw. He was at 15 yards. I didn't feel comfortable with the angles he was giving me. I was afraid to bleed at him. I've not done that before. And he walked in front of me. I had to let down because there's a tree there. He came over to my right, again, 15, 20 yards, came to full draw. And again, almost the same voice going through my head. If you don't shoot, he's going to walk right out of here. And that's exactly what happened. So, that was another lesson this year, is make up your mind ahead of time what you're willing to shoot, and then shoot. It was my inexperience in indecision, but it was a great experience, and I learned something new again.
Now let's talk about your creek bottom and your 100 yards of wood lot with houses on one side, and I'm assuming ag land on the other. Is that pretty much true?
Yeah, actually, our house is the only house right close here on our side of the road. So our house is surrounded on all three, front, back, and sides by ag fields. So this little strip of woods on the back end of our property, right when you get to the back end of our property, it opens up into 40 acres of woods probably. And on behind us. Then off to the side, it joins a small patch of woods that follows the creek. And so I have a salt lick back here, and there's some pretty nice bucks on there. This summer I had one really nice buck. So I don't know where his home area is during the breeding season, but it's not here. I mean, he moved off sometime in October, I think it was. But I'm working at trying to make the place more attractive. I have some food plots here, even though we're surrounded by ag. I put forage soybeans out, and that'll keep them. They'll like them even in the middle of the winter. They come out and eat the pods. And this year I started putting turnips and a winter mix. That out in the fall, so there's some nutrition during the winter too. So it's a tiny area, but to me, half the fun is to see what can I do here to get deer onto our property. So I've planted some switchgrass on the perimeter of these couple small areas that I have as food plots, just to try to give them a protected area. So it's not the place you're going to go to get a Boone and Crockett necessarily, but it's just fun to see that you can affect their movements and their patterns by what you plant, or making some trails, or making it a safe place and stuff. Our dog died this summer, and I noticed this fall we had a lot more deer in daylight than what we used to have. So I think she probably used to run the deer quite a bit too. But anyway, so yeah, it's just a small area, but it's joined all the way around by fields. And so it's like I'm part of a large area.
So you got 40 acres, then you got a creek. So are we talking a pinch point? Are we talking a funnel where they come out of the 40 and drop down in the creek? And the other part of that, how far can you hunt east to west? How far can you hunt down the creek or up the creek?
Well, it's probably 150 yards from the house to the back end of the property, and that's where the creek is, and then it cuts diagonally up through our property. But where I hunt back there, it's a pinch point. There's a creek crossing there, and it's about as narrow a point in the tree line from the transition of the big woods in the back to as it goes on up the creek on our property. It widens out a little bit, but I really have about one little spot on our property to hunt, and it's back there at the creek crossing. So that's where I put my minerals as well, so they can have them year round, and that's where my stand is.
Now, folks, if you haven't read Jerry Everhart's or listened to his information, he's big on mock scrapes, isn't he?
Yeah, that's kind of his one of the cornerstones of his. I guess I'd call it a three-legged approach, probably.
How many mock scrapes do you put out?
Again, taking his advice, I try. He said in his experiments in the past years ago, he put a scrape out and didn't really see anything. Put another one, and that's what I understand that a lot of people will try. Is they'll put a scrape out or two and nothing happens. And Jerry kept adding scrapes until he had 3 or 4 around a stand, and then he started seeing an increase in activity. So his thinking and experience is to he wants a minimum of 6. So I have 6 to 8 scrapes. I have another little small property I can hunt on too, and most of my stands have 6 to 8 scrapes on each one. Now this summer was the first time I was able to see on camera. I started the licking branches early this year using preorbital buck gland, and I had on trail cam video these does just going nuts over those licking branches with that buck preorbital gland on there. So that was really cool to actually see those things that I had started actually being used more actively. And then this fall, I had a buck. I'm pretty sure it's the buck that came through the first morning I hunted. He was coming through the last 2 weeks before that morning that I went out to hunt. He had been through there almost every night, working the branches and the scrapes. So, my goal is to make it more attractive to bring more bucks wanting to remember that area, come through there and check and say, hey, there's a bunch of does here, and want to check the scene out. So but that was pretty cool to see those scrapes that I had used, that I had created, to see them being used. That first morning that I hunted this year, a doe and her fawn came through, and the fawn went to the first scrape and messed around for a while and moved off, and the doe came to the same scrape and messed around for a while. And I know Jerry says most of his does he shoots at scrapes as well, and that's what I saw happen. She came, she stopped, she would have presented a nice shot, and I was in the middle of a real busy season at work, and I didn't, on the off chance I'd actually get a buck that morning, I didn't want to have 2 deer down and have to work them up. I was busy enough at work that I passed on that doe, but she presented a perfect shot just standing there in the scrape checking it out.
Now, Jerry talks about the box.
Yeah.
Did you set up your setup with a box or not?
Yeah, I can't do a complete box just because there's a couple of angles in the way our property is. So it's almost like a triangle instead. It just doesn't have that one leg coming down because, it's something unique about the property. But the other place where I do have a stand that I can hunt, and that's a real small property too, that one I do have a box around it. Yeah, which makes a lot of sense. Why
don't you explain that to the listeners?
So the goal is to find 2 parallel trails where if you had a stand in between them, you could shoot to either trail. So, whatever your shooting distance is. And you want your stand in between those 2 parallel trails, and you go out in front of your stand another, say, 20 yards or whatever, and cut a crossing trail. It would look like a big H on the ground because you'd have these 2 parallel trails coming towards you on either side with a crossing. Or like if you took a set of goalposts and just knocked them down, that's where your stand then is, in the bottom of that. And then the scrapes you want to set up as far to your left as you can shoot. And you can shoot down to 7 o'clock or something if you to your left if you're right-handed. Then all the way around to your right, you could shoot to 3 o'clock anyways. And you want to have scrapes around that perimeter as many as you can, which provides a lot more shot opportunities no matter which direction the deer comes from. Also, when you've scented those scrapes that morning before you get in the stand, and you've descented as much as possible, you've minimized your odor footprint. It's still there, but you've really minimized it. And what's very strong is the deer, the doe and heat urine odor down there on the ground. So it's kind of a double whammy. You've minimized your scent. You've really increased that scent as an attractant, but also as a byproduct, you've got a cover scent as well to kind of help cover up whatever minor odor you might have left.
Now, talking about licking branches, do you have to cut licking branches and tie them into a branch to have them? Because, you're putting up 6, mock scrapes, all of them are not going to have licking branches.
Well, right. So you have to, and so the scrape actually becomes secondary to the licking branch. So the location of the scrape is dependent on being able to get a licking branch. For some of them, I can find a tree. It may be a sapling. It may be 5 or 10 yards off the trail, but I can actually pull the whole sapling down and tie it. So now really the top end of the sapling is what's hanging out over the trail, not technically a branch. But whatever you can do to pull, and these branches, some of mine, I don't care for them as much, but they may be only as big as a pencil. I did one on a pine tree this summer that was half inch or bigger in diameter, and I have no idea why. They pounded the heck out of that thing. The does did this summer, and I don't know why, but yeah, anything from a pencil up to your thumb or half inch, whatever, can be the licking branch. And I like to, again, going off of what Jerry said, it's nice if you can find a live branch that you can utilize, tie down, get in position, because if they don't kill it off, you've got it there for next year. If you cut a branch off and wire it into place or whatever, it's good for one winter, and then every year you got to keep putting another one there. So my scrapes are dependent on the ability to pull a licking branch down there. So if that makes sense, the licking branch comes first, and then if I can get a licking branch, I'll go ahead and put a scrape there.
And so you want, all your scrapes to be at your maximum yardage. You know, if you
Yeah,
can shoot dead on at 50 yards, fine. If it's 20 yards, then that's what it is.
right. Wherever you're comfortable. Yeah. You're comfortable. Yeah. And he always recommends not putting a scrape where you can't shoot to. Like, if a deer comes along and hits the scrape that's maybe too far behind you that you can't shoot to, and maybe that's the only one he visits when you're up in the stand, you've lost him. So just putting the scrapes in where you can actually shoot to is also part of the plan.
Well, Mike, we've covered a lot. Hey, listeners, Mike, what's your email address? So if listeners get questions about Hunter's Blend or the techniques we've been talking about, because a lot of people have small acreage and they don't realize, the potential of it. One, you have to have deer. And if everything else is right, you'll be surprised. You put a trail camera out there, you'll be surprised what comes through there.
Oh, I mean, our garden is, 40 yards behind the house. And last year, a doe was just mowing off our strawberries. She found a smorgasbord there, and every morning she was coming over there. And by the time I found out, it pretty well, killed last year's crop. But this fall, right there at the corner of the garden, there's a small sapling. This fall, that tree got all rubbed up. I mean, they're all around us here. And yeah, so the goal is if you've got deer, you can pull them onto a little property. But yeah, my email is mike@huntersblendcoffee.com. mike@huntersblendcoffee.com. And you know what? We'll do a giveaway of coffee. If you guys, if anybody's interested in trying some coffee, send me an email with your name and address, and then we'll do a drawing. And if we get a lot of people sending in their emails, we'll give away more coffee too. So give away a little bag of coffee for you to try out. So you can email me at mike@huntersblendcoffee.com.
Mike, it's really been a pleasure. Some of the things you're doing throughout the world, and plus, hearing a guy that's hunting, 200 yards, 150 yards off his back deck, and that's cool. I think because sometimes we get all wound up. Oh, I got to be here, I got to be there, and they're right behind the house. Now, like you said, Boone and Crockett bucks aren't there today, but if you keep doing what you're doing, there's no telling, who's going to waltz along a creek bottom.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and for me, I truly have as much fun planting, crops and watch. And that's another thing I learned real quick, that you can. The first time I planted anything, I had my neighbor disc up the sod, but ever since then, any seeding I have done, even soybeans, I've done with a lawn seeder and literally overseeded right onto the unprepared soil, right through whatever residue is there from last year's crop. And I usually go over it with a lawn roller after that. I don't know if I need to, but try to do it when it's pretty moist in the spring and it's going to rain again soon. And you don't have to have, I literally have a 4-wheeler and a lawn seeder. And you can, you don't have to till the soil. With Roundup Ready soybeans, you can burn off all the weeds and have a really nice stand of soybeans. And I'm sure your germination rate isn't as good as if you tilled it up, but good Lord, if you can go out there with a lawn spreader and just throw the seed out and get, if it's half or 3/4 the germination rate as you would have had, but you don't have the cost and time and expense of a tractor and a disc and all of that. That really opens up a lot more opportunity for people on a smaller budget or without big equipment. You can do a food plot.
Well, on behalf of thousands of listeners across North America, Mike, this has been just it's been very enjoyable from my point of view, and I hope you enjoy being a guest on Whitetail Rendezvous.
Absolutely. It's been a lot of fun, and appreciate the opportunity. And I always like hearing your stories, and I just always astounded. Like, I hope when I'm your age, I could get to half the places that you're still getting. That is really impressive.
Thanks so much. On today's show, we're going to welcome Les Welch. Les is from the Chippewa Falls area north central Wisconsin. And he's been hunting for a few years, 31 to be exact. And he's hunted a number of states and provinces throughout North America. Les is also the type of guy that realizes you have to be physically fit to tackle the mountains, even tackle the swamps where some big bucks hide. So he is very involved in fitness. He's very involved in triathlons. He's just involved in the outdoors, every aspect of it. He's also heavily involved in the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, pro staff for Sitka Gear. So all in all, Les really is ingrained in the outdoor industry. So sit back, relax, take some notes, because you're going to find some big buck nuggets on today's show.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, where you can listen and learn from the experts so you can be more successful on your next hunt. Until next time, listen, learn, and succeed.